The agenda this week debated Canadian content rules, looked for ideas to improve democratic politics, questioned Facebook Canada on plans to keep things clean ahead of this year's federal election, and assessed the impact of children on the pay equity gap. The agenda's week in review begins with rising floodwaters in Ontario. Your Worship, do you want to tell us what you went through a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it wasn't pleasant. It really goes back to 2010, two big events in the city of Windsor, around 90 millimeters of rainfall, a very intense amount of rainfall, caused probably 1,000 homes to flood, and the city reacted in some very direct ways after that. But then as we're moving forward, 2016, we see 190 millimeters of rainfall. Again, over a very short period or a very prolonged period of time, but the impact was about 2,800 basements flooding in the city of Windsor, followed by, as Glenn mentioned, less than a year later, the largest flood in the city's history, 220 millimeters of rain, affected over 6,600 homeowners and caused about $175 million in loss in the city of Windsor. So quite dramatic to see that amount of garbage out on the street, people just having to empty their basements, really disrupting lives. And I'll tell you, we were trying to bring garbage trucks all the way from North Bay to help move the garbage, trying to bring them in from the United States. But there was a hurricane down in Texas. So I mean, we were trying to get resources to deal with what we saw on the street. But quite catastrophic in the city of Windsor, and certainly we're as flat as a pancake and surrounded by water. So we get scared about prolonged rainstorms, but also high lake levels as well.
How is it right now?
Right now we have a flood watch in effect, and so people are scared. These types of events play on people's psyche. And that's one thing we have to remember. This is not just, okay, it's one sort of extreme weather event and it goes away and everyone moves on with their life. It actually does have a lasting impact on people. And certainly as a mayor, as a local politician, you want to help. You're there to help the residents. And this is just one type of event where you have very little within your control that you can do. But we've done everything we can do. We thank the federal government. Recently came down last week. We put together a $90 million part of our sewer master plan, a $90 million first phase. They came down and funded a third of that. So we're committed to trying to make the improvements that we can make, but we're also cognizant of the fact that our sewer system in totality is about 1,700 kilometers long. And so for perspective, that would be like driving from Windsor to Orlando. And so there's a lot of work to do. It took 100 years to build the system. It's going to take many, many decades to make the improvements.
We should just say on the issue of sewers, you and I are going to have another conversation after this one is over about the sewers, because there's a lot more to talk about there as well. Andrea, how easy is it for someone to find out if they live in an area that's prone to flooding before they move into an area that's prone to flooding?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's what you hear a lot of the times is what Matt is experiencing, of figuring this out after there is water in his basement or in his house and he is getting flooded, and then figuring out that his insurance policy does not cover flooding and flood repairs. It's a lot easier when you have this additional funding that will help you kind of recover out of that situation. But we did a study across Canada. We looked at 280 municipalities.
Who's we?
We, as in my research group at the University of Waterloo, including two professors there. And we were interested in figuring out, okay, if I am a concerned citizen and I look at the news and I'm being told by my governments that I should be flood aware, that I have to be ready, what information would I find? And it's not necessarily easy. It's not easy, and it's not easy in Ontario either, unfortunately. We looked at, for example, the city of Hamilton. You have a variety of conservation authorities that publish their flood maps online. So depending on where you are in the city of Hamilton, you would have to figure out which conservation authority you fall under and then kind of look in those channels.
We have a very reduced system for looking at whether there's a problem constitutionally with bills. And so it's fine to say, oh, we looked at this and we thought about it and somebody said charter and we still voted for it. That doesn't count.
Okay, hang on. Let me jump in here.
We need a better system.
We need a better system. That's a perfect segue to where I want to go now, because I don't want to let the clock get away from us here without, and I'll give you the first kick at it, Brittany, because I know you wanted in on this. What if we picked politicians a completely different way from the way we do right now? Roll clip, please, Sheldon.
The idea is actually very simple. We randomly select people and put them in Parliament. Let's think about that for a few more minutes, shall we? Imagine we chose you and you and you and you and you and you down there and a bunch of other random people, and we put you in our parliaments for the next couple of years. Of course, we could stratify the selection to make sure that it matched the socio-economic and demographic profile of the country and was a truly representative sample of people. 50% of them would be women. Many of them would be young, some would be old, a few would be rich, but most of them would be ordinary people like you and me. This would be a microcosm of society, and this microcosm would simulate how we would all think if we had the time, the information, and a good process to come to the moral crux of political decisions. And although you may not be in that group, someone of your age, someone of your gender, someone from your location, and someone with your background would be in that room.
Okay, that's a fellow named Brett Hennig, and at a TED Talk in Hungary, he pitched this idea called sortition. Not elections, sortition. Brittany, what do you think?
Well, as somebody who loves ideas, new ideas around democracy, governance, I enjoyed this, but I have questions. I have questions around what if those people don't want to serve? Can they just pass it along to the other person? Is this mandatory? How do we account for racial diversity? He did mention women, but what are the metrics around racial diversity? Is it to proportion of, like, say if we were to implement it in Canada?
Let's say it is yes. Let's say yes.
Well, then racialized people will be drastically underrepresented. I would imagine within this sample size, there may be 1, 2, whatever. I'm not sure of the exact number.
Why would they be? What if?
Well, if we're looking at the Canadian population at large and the demographics, et cetera, right? Will that allow for their views to be permeated within it? What are the dynamics of this random selection? So it just raises a lot of interesting questions that I think we need to grapple with. But every time when we think about democracy, we always have these grand sweeping, I guess, categories of like Canadians, the people, et cetera, but very, very, actually not often at all, we don't actually specifically pinpoint who we're speaking about. So when I talk about democracy, I want to hear from those who are most marginalized, those who are actually not represented in this political system. How do they feel about their representative democracy?
Presumably this could, anyway, the idea would be this could do something about that. We got 5 minutes left here. I want to hear Jeffrey Simpson on this. Sortition, what do you think?
Absolutely crack brain idea. I mean, you know.
Get off the fence. Tell me what you really think.
No. I mean, good for TED Talks, but politics is complicated. The issues are extremely complicated, and it sounds arrogant to say that a random selection of people could make better decisions than those who've actually stood in elections, thought about the issues, asked their fellow citizens for support, joined a political party. I think that you would get people. Look, in my experience, and I've been around for a while, and I'm saying this knowing that Craig is with us, I've known hundreds of members of Parliament, and they are no more or less smart than the average cross-section of Canadians. And they work a hell of a lot harder, by the way, than most of us do. And they don't deserve the abuse that we sometimes heap on them. And so this other scheme, you have a large civil service, right? We're fortunate in Canada to have an honest and generally very good civil service. Who's going to run the civil service in this collection of 350 people? Who's going to direct the civil service? Who's going to oversee the administration of the programs on which we depend? Who's going to make sure that the taxes get cut? Politics is a difficult, government is a difficult business, and to arbitrarily pick people out of nowhere, even if they're quote unquote fully representative, is a recipe for chaos. I remind you that several hundred years ago, Poland tried a parliament just like that, a whole bunch of individuals, and it all fell apart and the country collapsed.
There are a lot of people who are on social media who believe that you are part of the deep state. They think that we are part of the deep state. They are very suspicious of a lot of players in Western democracies. And they may look at your background and they may say, hey, this is a guy who used to work for the Federal Liberal Party, used to work for Michael Ignatieff. And they will wonder whether you are bringing to the current job that you have, which is a nonpartisan role, a partisan lens. What would you say to them?
Well, look, it's simply not accurate. I mean, I've spent 2 years working for Michael Ignatieff. He was actually my professor from a long time ago, which is why I ended up working for him, in a career that has been over 15 years. I spent more time as a nonpartisan public servant, and I've worked at McGill University. and now I'm here at Facebook, and I've spent 4.5 years at Facebook. And the truth of the matter is, we're a platform for all voices. And so in my job here, we actually need to be working and supporting all political stripes. And that's a very important thing for us, and something that we do and we're very mindful of on a day-to-day basis.
Here's something from the United Kingdom House of Commons report called Disinformation and Fake News. This came out in February, and these were some findings following an 18-month investigation into disinformation and fake news. They said Facebook has continually hidden behind obfuscation. It continues to choose profit over data security, taking risks in order to prioritize their aim of making money from user data. It seems clear to us that Facebook acts only when serious breaches become public. Companies like Facebook should not be allowed to behave like digital gangsters in the online world, considering themselves to be ahead of and beyond the law. Okay, Kevin, your response to that?
Well, I think we've already been very clear about our posture with respect to regulation and legislation. We welcome it, and we've talked about, and our CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, has been very clear that in particular in the areas of content, in the area of privacy, in the area of elections, and in the area of data portability, we think it is actually very helpful if governments lay down baselines and establish proper frameworks. I would say, actually, the other thing, though, is that in Canada, we're actually doing pretty well as a general statement about what frameworks are like. We actually do have a national privacy framework, right? We've had this since 1999 or 2000. We now, most recently, have a new election law, C-76, which actually does regulate online platforms and political advertising as it pertains to elections. And so in many ways, I would say in my role on a global policy team, looking at all the countries in which we do operate, Canada already has taken significant leadership in actually getting some of these frameworks right.
Do you feel, I mean, let's be honest here, most people I know love Facebook. They love to be on Facebook, they love sharing their pictures, they love telling their stories, they get a lot of news and information off Facebook. And most millennials I know don't really care about the fact that you've got all sorts of personal private information about them. Do you think you're a bit of a whipping boy right now that some critics and media just love to hound Facebook for whatever reasons?
I think that the internet generally, but also Facebook specifically, it has given rise to a lot of issues that are not necessarily new issues, but are issues that are kind of seen through a different prism because they're on the internet. And so we know we have a lot of work to do. This is something, and we can't do it alone. So obviously we are doing things. We are drastically changing the way the platform works. We are trying to give Canadians greater transparency in political advertising. We are trying to develop partnerships. But the thing is, we do need to work with more people. And that's what we intend to do between now and the election, but quite frankly, way past the election.
Let me just say that Canadian radio is still powerful, profitable, and popular. I mean, 88% of the people tune into the radio in Canada every week, so it's still a very viable industry. And CanCon, despite all the grumbling in the 70s, because we were putting out some really substandard stuff and we were forced to play this next to the best artists in the world, CanCon for radio for music has been a wild success. I don't think anybody is ever going to say that, well, we don't need CanCon on the radio because A, it's the right thing to do, and B, there's a tremendous appetite for it. We have a vibrant domestic music scene where we have a number of artists that are look at the Tragically Hip, were very successful and very profitable.
Only because of CanCon?
Mainly because of CanCon, because they didn't have that much reach outside of our borders. Then we have artists like Justin Bieber and The Weeknd and Drake and Sarah McLachlan and Shania Twain and Celine Dion. All these artists are Canadian who have managed to come up through our system and then break out worldwide. For a country of our size and our population next to the United States, we have no business being as successful as we are on the music stage. But a lot of that has to do with our infrastructure and our cultural support and our financial support.
But I infer from your comment that without the CanCon regulations, requiring broadcasters to play X number of minutes, hours, songs, etc., you don't think these artists could have broken out otherwise?
Well, it's taken decades for this system to come into its own. And I think it would, if broadcasters wanted to cut their CanCon right now, I think that they would hear from the audience, because we have developed, as a nation, a strong, strong affection for homegrown artists. So whether it's 30%, 35%, or 40%, nobody's complaining about it anymore.
Because we like them.
We do like them. And if you want something that's not offered, well, then now we have these options, online options, which is where things begin to get sticky.
Well, let's talk about that stickiness here. The FANGs, as they're called, FANGs, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. I want to show you a little clip here. This is Richard Sturzberg, the former broadcasting executive who was on this program not too long ago, talking about the infiltration into Canada of the FANGs. Sheldon, if you would.
They are vampires in the culture in the sense that they come, they set up in Canada. They do not pay taxes in Canada, despite the fact all the Canadian media companies obviously pay taxes. They have drained, between Facebook and Amazon, they have drained 50% of the media advertising market out of Canada and redirected the money now to Silicon Valley.
But clearly they are providing something people desperately want, which is why they're so successful.
No doubt about that. And that's fine, but they should not be allowed to operate enjoying significant advantages that no Canadian company has. All the Canadian companies pay tax, they respect the foreign ownership rules, they make contributions to Canadian culture. The FANGs do none of these things. So they're kind of free riders within the economy.
Richard Sturzberg, the former broadcasting executive. Catherine Tate, the president and CEO of the CBC, called Netflix in Canada cultural imperialism. What are you hearing out there in the media ecosphere about what needs to be done to fix this issue about the digital giants, in his words, free riding in our system?
Well, this is a chorus that echoes across the industry. Broadcasters, cable companies have been up in arms about the fact that the playing field is no longer level, in their words, that they have all these obligations. Tech giants are able to compete with them. They have deep pockets. They're already spending billions of dollars on content where Canadian broadcasters don't have those kinds of budgets. So they're competing already with unlevel resources. And they're talking about having also requirements that aren't level. And so you saw Pierre-Carl Péladeau in front of the CRTC just last week saying the system is broken and it needs to be completely rebuilt.
We're just going to share some of the stats from the RBC Economics Report. So, Sheldon, put these up if you would. Here we go. Following the birth of a first child, a woman's earnings typically drop by 48%. Somewhat expected, given that women usually take some time off following childbirth. However, that penalty continues typically for 5 years after the birth. Women between the ages of 25 and 29 experience a further drop of 14%. And how about this? When men become fathers, their income increases, typically. Anyways, let's get into this. What do those numbers say to you?
Well, I was surprised to see that the penalty is only 5 years, to be honest.
You thought it was longer?
I do think that it's longer. One of the things that I think is important to realize is that the RBC report focuses on hourly wages, not on the total income picture. So what you're missing out on is women who opt into less lucrative careers, part-time work, contract labor, so where the hourly rate isn't the entire picture of what they're bringing home, and I think that impact is a lot longer. And then, of course, we have women that drop out of the workforce entirely. So I think those numbers aren't really captured by the report, although I'd be happy if the impact of having a child was just 5 years.
But your sense is it's actually worse than indicated here.
I think so. I mean, in my practice, I see a lot of job loss related to pregnancy and childcare issues, and the impact of that sort of job loss at that stage in your career, which for most parents is early, right? In your 20s or 30s for the average parent, or the first birth of a child. To lose a job or see a demotion or have workplace challenges that early in your career, the effects can be really long lasting.
Understood. Let's go around the table here. Margaret, your view on those numbers.
I think there is the penalty. The 5 years, I agree with Sarah. Is like I thought it would be longer because a lot of the mothers, when they give birth, they usually like to stay home with the baby and just to get them up to speed on things. And some friends I know, they actually take leave until they are grown ups before they re-enter the job market. At that stage, there will be a lot of penalty that they have to suffer.
Michael, your take.
Yeah, well, for me, seeing numbers like that, it's a real call to action, isn't it? It's saying, here's a problem. It's facing us. It's right in our faces. We've got to do something. So we've got to understand that. But we also have to look at this thing, this discrepancy between men doing better, how becoming a parent leads to an increase in your prestige, and you're obviously going to be responsible and all those sorts of things. And it's one more area where women are paying a penalty for the ways that we have set up our families, our regimes of childcare, lack of daycare. It really tells us we've got to take action.
My sense is, though, that there's a pretty decent awareness out there of the fact that women's incomes take a hit when they have a child. But the fact that men would do better, I'm not sure there's that much awareness about that. Did that surprise you?
I've seen this before in other studies, but in general, it is one of those really sorts of numbers.
How do you see numbers like this reflected typically in the work that you do?
Right. So, I mean, I agree with you that that initial dip isn't surprising, and a lot of that is linked to the taking of parental leave immediately after the birth of a child. And as I mentioned before, we see a lot of job loss around the time of a pregnancy and the birth of a child. Daycare issues are a real challenge for people in maintaining full-time work in the career of their choice. But there's also, discrimination on the job that I think affects women's ability to earn at a rate equal to men.
What do you mean by discrimination on the job?
Right, so it's everything from the workplace just not being set up for the success of women or primary caregivers, so things like wining and dining clients late into the night, traveling for work, overtime hours, night shifts. Unpredictable shift scheduling, especially for low-wage workers, is a real problem when you have young children at home. So it becomes more difficult to succeed and make a good impression on your employer in order to get promotions. To actual discrimination, people feeling that mothers are not as capable, not as dedicated, not as hardworking because they maybe occasionally have to stay home with a sick kid. So you see a full range of behavior from employers when you have young parents, particularly young mothers, in the workplace.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, May 3rd, 2019. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety on our website at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. Helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.